And that means it's time for. Oh, I'll talk about the next game. After it is tradition that after every game, I make a little review of the game that I just played. So usually I do it right after I finish the game because that way the impression is most fresh in my mind. And so normally how this works is that I talk about about the story, the graphics, the sound, and the gameplay, and then maybe I'll say what I felt about it overall. Okay, let's see. So usually that takes about 20 to 30 minutes. So of course, if any one of you were done here. Oh, by the way, I should mention, and of course, the next game I did list it on my channel too, but you'll see soon enough. After I finish this review, I will also just mention what will be the next game, and the game after the next game as well, because I usually reveal what the game after the next game is. But first, let's talk about the story. Okay, so there's not really much of a need for me to go into detail. I basically just said it while the credits were going on. I think the strongest part of this game is the story, the world building, and the ability, and just this encompassing world that is really tightly woven, mixed with philosophy, culture, and religion. This is one of the most, and the story was just twists at every turn, and just a showcase of of a world that's sort of almost too close to home. It's very, there were the plights and the things you saw in the game were just oh my gosh, this is totally reminds me of what's happening in real life, or what, not just a reflection of the struggles of modern day Africa, but also the modern day world with things like a place where the wealth gap is great. Basically, the wealth gap being there's the poor are ridiculously poor and the rich are ridiculously rich, or places where everyone relies on, there's corruption in the government, in the politics, in all the leaders, and very few recourse for all the people. And then and it's sort of they were reflecting different systems, and even the final battle, at this point you guys should know this, but even the final battle, there's no true, one thing about this game is that there are people who are evil, but even the powers that be may be against each other and you may not agree with them, but they all have really good points. They all have really valid, very valid reasons to believe in the world view they believe. So, for instance, with Dekina Aurion, she believed that the world can be saved if you give every individual the training and the opportunity, and that way you can save the world through that case. Whereas Nama Yode was no, that's not gonna do it, because even if you promote the individual, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to care about each other or be better to each other, because then they'll still be selfish. We need to make a world where everyone is focused on the group instead. Everyone must work for the common good. And it doesn't, so that is the primary goal. There should be no individual ambition, but just a sense of a brotherhood. And they both have very legitimate things. It's both even in the society today, the West, it's sort of a Western mentality of individuality versus the Eastern mentality of the group mentality. And you can see in each of those cultures both the greatness, the strengths and weaknesses of each approach, without getting too philosophical. And there's a lot of other philosophical stuff that's a little bit heavy, and sometimes even I had struggled with it too, because there's just a lot of information to take in. You can tell they really wrote this game to be a real world, a functioning world with both with human society and politics together. And even during the game, I wasn't even sure sometimes who I could root for, whether we should root for what Enzo and Irene have to do. They had to do some stuff that's there's not oh, this is a perfect choice. And no, there are ramifications. Even one thing where they illustrated in Isao with the rich with the rich family and the passing of the inheritance from one to another, from depending to either the new second wife or the first wife, because whichever choice you made, you ended up, there were ramifications for it. It's either you could side with the children, but then pull the family to poverty because they don't have a mistress that can't control the fortune, or you could side with the first wife and say, oh, the family will be prosperous, but you could screw the children over. And it's just like there was no easy solution to it. And so that's really one thing that I have to praise for. I would almost say that I will say that this is one of the best stories I've ever seen in the game. In my experience playing RPGs or games that are very story driven, this is probably one of the best ones, like in terms of world building, in terms of like how cohesive like the world is and how it functions. And like they really went all out. They even the combat is tied to the philosophy of the game too. And it's crazy. It's just so much detail packed into this game that even I have to go through the wiki and remember some of this stuff because there's so much information. So I will say that because of that, it's a little heavier than most RPG stuff. Like certainly heavier than most Japanese RPG. I'm sorry, I have to kick the Japanese RPG, where like there's a very strong sense of good and evil, and they're like, oh, okay, this side is clearly right and this side is clearly wrong. But in this game, it's more like there is no side that is truly wrongs per se. It's more like I like also the fact that the ultimate savior device, the Umoja Nafsi, how it's like, oh, if you just implant this into everybody, it will be fine. But it's more like, no, in this world there is no such thing as a miraculous cure that will just say that by hypnosis. That doesn't work. You can't just hypnotize everyone to believing what you want. You have to do it the right way. You have to present it. Everyone has to buy into it through their own awakening and through the sense of umoja, harmony. Yeah, and like I like that thought about knowing being good and evil. Well, I mean, there is great evil and there's great good. It's more like everything comes at a price. But of course, you try to do the best you can. You can't, if everyone feared doing, okay, this is like a side thing, but everyone's gotta try their best. You can't change anything if you don't do anything. If everyone was scared of the consequences, no one would ever do anything. Yes, it's called writing the story well because it's there to show you that there is not always a simple solution to everything. And I really did enjoy that aspect of the game, especially. So I will say, like, in terms of, like, a game, this might be one of the best stories. And I can put it alongside, like, many great RPGs with great story, like Earthbound, or Xenogears, or The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1. Some of the three, Xenoblade, like there was very good. It was very good, and this sense of cohesion, like this is like that's why I really appreciate this. It's sometimes you just can't stop the world from goofing up. But I think one thing that the game knows is like, Enzo's like, you know what, we need free will. We need a chance. We can't just impose and say we're right, because sometimes we're not right. Yes, I think that's like, I think the concept of free will and freedom being like, that's the key thing. That's the most important thing to find, because everyone's experience is limited, so you can't just solve everything with just your own experience. And I think I appreciate that, like that how like umoja is the goal to strive for, this world sense of harmony despite with people who connect their hearts together despite being diverse. That's actually an interesting concept. What Zama was meant to be, a light in a city of light. Let me think. What else do I want to say about the story? I mean, that I've already praised enough as it is. I do also like the fact that there were some that that things that happened before were also like referred to constantly. Oops. Sorry about that. Screensaver. and that was very much appreciated. So it felt like everything you did had consequence. Even things you were like, "Oh, this is inane. I don't really care," and they're like, "Oh, things in Nisao I did had consequences." And you were playing a part. You were always playing a significant part, even though you weren't always, not always from your full control. But despite that, you were able to change something. And I mean, Enzo, like the whole game is all about Enzo, like say, and Erine. At first, they realize that they're doing things, not. They think they're realizing they really don't have any control over what they're over the things that they have to do. So they're forced into situations where they have to do things, but it's like it was never like I made this happen. No, someone I'm playing into someone's plan, and then it's just this feeling of empathize with this feeling of uselessness throughout the game, where you're like, am I really in control of anything? And even Enzo, you could feel the character struggle as he also is kind of coming to grips with it. But I think one thing I like is that the game sort of like Enzo finally gets a chance to really do something, where because he destroyed the ultimate thing he was able to do was to destroy Umoja Nafsi, destroy the power to just hypnotize everybody, because it's really, and like to change the course of the world and to prevent it from just becoming a complete disaster. And like that's the ultimate like sense of agency, where he goes against both the powers that used to tell him what to do, and he says, no, you can't have your way, we can't use this, and he destroys it. And so I think that like that's the culmination of like his character development as a character, where he's like, I finally see what I have to do. And even Enzo and Irene see what they have to do with Zama. So I love that narrative of how they kind of worked up to that, and it's a sign of their growth as characters themselves. And of course, the relationship dynamic between Enzo and Irene was very fun to see. But it's like you still like, I didn't feel like, oh, this is totally fake, but like they're totally, they do make fun of each other sometimes, but at least like when time is right, they stick together even in the worst of times. Even when both Enzo and Irene showed the worst sides of their character. All hail the AI overlord. But anyway, I think that's enough for the. I've already covered the story. Yeah, the story's great. I think it saves it actually like helps the game in a lot of aspects. I will talk a little bit about the graphics. I do have to compare it against its peers, given that this game came out in 2016. Like it came out, let's see, in April, and we got to play it like about roughly. This was 5 or 6 months from after it came out. I'm pretty happy that it's kind of like has this fresh give up your freedom to a benevolent machine god. I was like, there's a oh, okay, anyway, I can't bring up the Chrono Cross reference I'm thinking of, because not everyone has played Chrono Cross, but you might understand what I'm talking about if you have played Chrono Cross. But not a game that I played on stream, but very old. Anyway, sorry. So the graphics wise, like the art's a little bit crude. I do like the player portraits and like some of the sprite work. And the background work, I feel like the more intricate art was reserved for when you're in cities and when you're in the battle and the dungeons. And then you have the map, which is the most plain part of the whole game. It's I know Dixmonicus and has touched on this when he was watching it as well. It was saying that the map is so plain compared to everything else, and I feel like that's a little bit of a jarring thing, where this kind of chibi looking sprites on the map for a game that's kind of serious in tone. This game is very serious, despite the colors and the beauty of. I do love the fact that they kind of like brought the colors of Africa here to us, like for us, like who are not. I will say us because we're here. I'm targeting a U.S. More Western audience. For the Western audience who is not familiar at all with Africa, I mean, like all you see is the media and how it portrays it. But I like the fact that they're like, no, Africa has, there's more to Africa than just the wars you see and all the bad things. This is what Africa can look like. The beauty of like our legends, our mythology, our history, and I think that's so important. And this, I feel like the art represented that well. I will say there are some parts that are kind of crude looking, and like, I mean, but they worked really hard to make it look nice. I can tell that. The videos are alright, are pretty good. I like the use of sprites as well. Yeah, Snowman Dong, the game's done. We beat the game. Let me see. What else I gotta say again? But yeah, the maps are okay. The maps are kind of plain looking. And there were sometimes like the effects. Some of the effects look a little bit like choppy. Like the stun effect is probably maybe not like clear enough. One thing I wish in terms of graphics, I wish in the battle that the battle effects were a little more refined. They're a little bit rough looking, and like especially like the stun animation doesn't look that great, honestly. I mean, you can tell you're stunned. And what else I was gonna say again? And I will say it's certainly not going to be the most. This is not the most beautiful sprite rendered game. There are certainly other games from this year or the previous years that certainly might take the cake. But I think it is sufficient. It's good and it's pretty good. And like there are certain backgrounds that are like, oh, that actually looks really nice. You can tell like the attention to detail. So I do think that it will, at least with this kind of game, it will still look pretty good. The one thing I do want to mention is sometimes the UI is a little rough looking, and the text kind of spills out, so it just gives the sense of unfinished or unpolished, where the text kind of spills out at certain boxes, and the font's a little like kooky at times. And I think the other thing I should mention is just, man, there are a lot of editing errors in this game. This game really needed an editor's pass on the English translation, at least. I don't know what it's like on the French side. The game is originally in French because it was, for the main audience, was from Cameroon, which speaks French. So maybe the game's writing is even better there, but we have to work with the English because none of us can speak. I can't speak French. If you're here, you know I can't speak French, so. So other than that, the sprite work for the enemies is nice, and like the style is cohesive. And the only thing is like, yeah, the hitboxes are a little. It's just some of the effects could have used a little work, but I do think I enjoyed it. I do like the fact that the videos had some pretty elaborate choreography. It's pretty cool to watch too. Anything else? I think that's it for graphics. Where it's not the best looker in the game. It is not a vanillaware game, but I think it still works out, and I don't feel like, oh, if I play this later, I'll feel like it's unplayable, it's an eyesore. Not at all. I like it. It has its charm to it, but the UI stuff just needs to, like, they really needed to refine the UI, and it just looks a little bit unpolished at certain points. I'm just talking in game developer mode. Anything, let me see. So sound, with musics and sound. I mean, we're listening to some of the awesome soundtracks now. The music is really not. I actually really like this game's music. There are some really great tracks in this. I'm probably gonna go listen to the Aurion soundtrack. So I kickstarted and I got the soundtrack for free, so I do have the MP3s for it. I'm pretty happy. I'm definitely gonna go give a lot of these a listen. I'm pretty satisfied. The sound effects, some of them sound a little like they're okay. I mean, they're not the most powerful and like the most mind-blowing sounds I've ever heard. The voice acting is fine too, and I do appreciate the fact that it's not in English. They left it in its original language, Swahili. And so you get this sense that, oh, you're really playing a game in Africa. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. I mean, it's great. I'm happy that this is a great soundtrack. I didn't really remember all the tracks really evoke that bright mood. And there's some of the dungeon music was really nice. And the Swahili sounds nice, right? You would never think like, oh, who cares about... Here's the thing. The world's like, what? Who cares about Swahili? Saksi Ishaka Mickey Master. Mickey Mouse. No, it was not Mickey Mouse. Oh, you Dexmonicus. The Swahili certainly adds that feeling too. It's nice. I really like it. And so the voice acting is a nice touch in even for the cinematic. So they're very special. I almost wondered. I guess it would have been hard, but I almost wondered how I would feel about this game if this game was almost entirely voice acted. Irene, Negi Master. But yeah, great soundtrack and great voice acting, and the sound effects are alright. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell you're getting hit, but alright, so now we come to the gameplay and controls. Let's see. Yes, Dome and Dung, the game's over. I'm just talking about the game. Ishaka! Let's see, the gameplay and controls. What do I think about them? Oh boy, here's another one. Here's the thing, the control is fine. Like, it feels responsive and I can do a lot of stuff. I will say that using this to try to do certain moves very precisely is really tough. Because the problem is you can't use the D-pad, which is your item user and your Aurions. So you use this to use an item, and use this to change your Aurions. So it's kind of tricky to use. And then using this to do precisely. So sometimes what I found was Irene would sometimes use the wrong move and then it would waste time and that would be really sad. And then I have to use a regular item to compensate for that. And that's kind of like, a little on the frustrating side. I did like the fact that you could use items as quick as you want, like in most MMOs, like Diablo, or in the RPG like Diablo. That was an interesting, because like although this game was very inspired by like the Tales of series, it does deviate, particularly with items where you can just spam it as much as you want. So you just spam lots of items. The other thing I don't so the controls are like they're pretty good. It's just that with the C stick that you're using, my controller, it kind of made it tough. Yeah, I hated that. Well, you like cooldowns? For this game, I'm kind of okay with my Goomies. Yes. Tales of is infamous for, like, the item cooldowns. In Tales of, you can't use an item, spam it. You have to use it, and then you get a cooldown, you gotta wait. But in this game, you can spam it like Diablo, and it does help you survive certain things. I'm personally fine with that because I played Diablo 2, and so I'm very, very used to spamming. And sometimes, especially with some of the DPS some of these bosses can do, in hard mode especially, I will say the gameplay in hard mode is kind of like the HP. I can't fault the game too hard because honestly, I was playing in hard mode, so of course the bosses are going to be way harder and be HP sponges. It did get a little bit tiring to do after a while. And I know queens are evil. It's true that some Western media likes to portray queens as being evil too. I don't know why either. I always thought that was really strange. Anyway. What was I gonna say again? I do like, hard mode is a little bit tiresome because the fights take way too long. It was such a pain. I think once you get a bit stronger, they start becoming more reasonably length. Even the final boss wasn't as long as I thought. I thought I was gonna have to fight for 45 minutes, but it only took like 20 minutes. I think 20 to 25. So I think it was a reasonable time length. Kind of scary though. Very stressful. And the one thing I really, really don't like is that this game, sometimes you're just checkmated. You end up in stun lock and you're dead. You can't escape from it. That's one thing I don't like about the game, is that there's kind of like no cooldown between when you get hit or not. I mean, I'm not expecting a long thing, but it's just like there's actually battles where often I died because I couldn't escape. And I ended up just getting hit by 10 enemies, all one after the other, and you can't escape because you're stun locked. So yeah, that was kind of annoying. I hated getting checkmated too. I also don't like how the game is very stingy about revival items. Oh, a cooldown between no, not for items. Like a cooldown, a stun cooldown, or at least allow you to break out of it. There's a lot of enemies that were just that could stun you over and over again. They fire things and you get stun locked and you're just dead. It's checkmate. It's like a checkmate. It's basically like, yep, you're dead, and you have to spam items or you're gonna use your Koroba. And the game's very stingy about Korobas, which is the revival item. Like, what a pain the game is. Korobas are really rare. Scoop fights, basically the regular enemy fights. Yeah, stun lock is kind of lame, and getting like I think the worst part is not just to get the stun lock. The other thing I don't like is that sometimes when you get hit, you kind of bounce around like this, and then you kind of get sucked back in. It's really the physics from getting hit are really strange. They're a little unpredictable, and sometimes it was frustrating because it would just bring me closer to the enemy, and I get stun locked again, and it's just like, oh, it's so annoying. And I know they give you a lot of tools to deal with it. You could summon Dramane, or you could, if you had him, or you could use Irene to cast a spell, but it's just, it's such a pain in the butt. And Irene is it's dangerous because you're bringing her into dangerous spots. So I'm not really a big fan of it. So sometimes the combat system was like the physics are really strange, and it kind of made me kind of hurt the experience in my opinion for me. So I was like, oh, I'm fighting against the battle system controls in this, so it's kind of frustrating where you don't feel like you're completely in control. The other thing I also had and I think for me that's most of the combat problems, and also the fact that the Aurion fusion is a little bit weird. Yeah, you had your handy wife in the pocket. That sounds so bad. One of the things I did like was the fact. No, actually, Aurion fusion's also a little strange too because you have to do it in battle, which is kind of I felt that was the wrong decision. I would have hoped that you could just have done an Aurion fusion outside of battle. I don't understand why they made it a battle only thing, and I kind of like I don't get the reasoning. Because like you notice I had to do Aurion fusions in the middle of dangerous battles, and it's just like, why am I doing it here? Why and so are you choosing such a dangerous place as a place to fuse Aurions? Why? And like you can fail, and then it just sucks. You lost some ability points, and I think the worst part is just ability points just go down like that. It's ridiculous too. And stamina is such a pain. It's a pain because you need stamina to dodge and block, but once you're out of stamina, you can't dodge and block, so you're pretty much dead. So you gotta use an item to heal ability points, and it's kind of like I get that they wanted to limit you and make sure you couldn't just dodge everything. Yeah, Irene. That mechanic's a little strange. I do know that they did that because they couldn't figure out a good way to implement like a party system. So they decided to make it so that she helped you that way. And I think for Dramane it's the same thing as well. I think it's an interesting compromise. So then the player could just focus on controlling Enso and sometimes summoning Irene when necessary. And you need her a lot because she's the only one that can really heal you, so you don't have to use items. And I think there's even more depth to the combat. It's just that I couldn't really get a chance to use it because so many of the bosses just like they just break out of stun. You can't combo them, so it's just like you're just sort of flailing and fighting the combat system and trying to dodge these spells that are really hard to dodge. Most of the spells I'm like, I can't dodge this. I have to just item spam to get out of it. And it became a kind of a trend, especially with some of the tougher bosses like Elorine and Narba. Even Dramane, at least Dramane's was easier to dodge, actually. I guess in some ways that fight's a little easier. And like it is kind of sad when you have to fight Dramane too and Narba, two of the people that you one is the person, one of the like people you knew from your hometown. The other was like a person that is you're supposed to be your link, and you're fighting against him too. Always thought that was an interesting development that you had when it happened. What was I gonna say again? There's more to this. Right. The other thing I also don't like about the game is that there are some times when you can't tell whether or not you can pass through something. This is a more of a gameplay, a little bit more graphic side, but sometimes you don't know if you can walk through somewhere, and in town you don't know how to reach it because there's no clear. It's not clear exactly how you're supposed to get there. And so you're just like, oh, I can't get through this area, or I don't know if I'm going the right way. At least the one good thing I will note is that at least the map is pretty clear. The only thing I don't like about the map is that I have to turn it on when I'm playing in the middle of combat. Not combat, when I'm playing in the middle of the game, so I'm like, okay, where am I supposed to go? So I have to hit the map, and it pauses the game, and I have to look, and then I have to make it there. I'm getting to the platforms and wall climbing. I haven't gotten there yet. So oftentimes you're just like, oh my goodness, I can't. I have to study this map every single time, and I have to keep opening it. It's a hassle. And so you have to hope that you're pretty good at reading maps, or else you're going to be like flipping the map on and off over and over again. So that made things a little bit more frustrating. I almost wish they had like something. See, here's the thing. I don't understand why people don't get like pointers from like from Metroid or Castlevania, like the Metroidvanias, sorry. The Castlevanias, which are the more exploratory ones, where they have the minimap as a small portion of the screen, and then you can really quickly summon it. It doesn't take very long, and it's just invisible on top of where you are. It's like that is so useful. Oh, Shovel Knight. See, there's a game I haven't really played enough to know that, but it's like, can't you just make things easier for me? Make it convenient. That always bothered me for this game, that you have to keep switching back and forth. Make it invisible in front of my face so it's very easy to summon and I can tell where I'm going. Even like the mini map would be helpful. This game needed a mini map. I keep complaining about that in every single game that doesn't have it. Like The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 at least solved that problem for the most part. It's imperfect, but it's better because of it. But like this game, they were like, no mini map for you. You're just gonna have to open the map over and over again. Yay for that. Thanks, game. Thanks for making me waste my time. The other thing that Illusion brings us up, the platforms and the wall climbing. Oh gosh, the single worst part of the game. The platforming is okay. It's just hard to tell sometimes where you're gonna land. It's certainly not the worst platforming I've ever had to do, but it is a little bit like, it's a little weird, and sometimes you're not sure if you reached it, so you just don't jump on it, and it's really strange, like the area of where you can land. And oh my gosh, the wall climbing. I hate the wall climbing. One, it uses stamina, so then like if you run out of stamina, you just sink and then you fall, and you have to do it all over again. And 3, if you get hit by an obstacle, it is entirely possible that obstacle will just kill you straight up. Spikes and flames. I hated that crap. It's so annoying when you have to do it. And you have to use up precious stamina, so you have to restore your items because you don't get your stamina back that quickly. It was so frustrating too, because like that happened where like I couldn't climb up to get to the next spot because I just kept getting hit by a spike, and then I fell, and then you fall, you get hit by every single obstacle and lose your health, and then eventually you might die, and then you have to start over from the beginning of the obstacle all over again. It's so painful. I hated doing that. I really think that section is completely unnecessary. They Yes, Domindong, I have to talk so long. For that, you are gonna... Domindong, you're going to get timed out for that. Give him a 5-minute timeout for doing that. That's your own fault. I told you. I told you, you can't be mean. He gets a 5-minute timeout. Thank you. Please do that. Please take care of that. I will talk as long as I want, Domanda. Thank you. Anyway, so... What was I going to say again? Great, he made me lose my train of thought. No, I'm just joking. I know I'm still talking about the walls. So yes, if they single-handedly... That is the single worst part of the game, and I think it just like... It wastes time. It's not even all that consequential. It just serves to pad the game out, and it's just like not even fun to do, because you kind of like jump, and then you sink, and sometimes you can just hit the spike, because the hit areas of the obstacles on the wall are really hard to judge. So you just like fall and you just die, and then you just start over doing. So you just wasted time. It's great. You get to see the death animation. It's so wonderful. So yeah, single worst part of the game. I think the other thing to mention, wow, there's so much, they've crammed a lot in the game. The fact that I have so much material to talk about is like pretty a testament to the game itself. Like, wow, I have a lot of material to talk about. So the puzzles I actually did enjoy. I think for the most part they're pretty good. The memory ones are like, well, it's the memory ones. They're not particularly hard, but it is pretty silly. They do kind of like, whatever. I have to memorize the sequence, and then I'll just put in the sequence. And that happens like a couple of times. It's not too many. The puzzles aren't too many. There aren't too many puzzles in this game. This game is very combat and dungeon focused. And the dungeons, at least, I mean, compared to games that are infamous for being horrible to navigate, The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1, and some dungeons in Lunar, Silver Star Story Complete, or some dungeons, a certain dungeon in Tales of the Abyss. At least this game has dungeons. The dungeons are they're easier to navigate, and you can pretty much figure it out. You don't have to worry about getting too lost. There aren't too many things, and oftentimes you'll just have to explore every room anyway, because that's the way forward. So it's not too bad. It wasn't too bad for me. It reminds me a little bit of like actually, like the layout's very similar to Child of Light, actually. That it gave me that feeling, except you're not flying through the dungeon. Oh no. Where that's a little bit of talk about the next game. Excuse me. Tales of the Abyss. Horrifying dungeon. Oh man, I don't want to say it. Let's just say it ends with gate. It starts with an A, and then the second word is gate. That dungeon was horrible to navigate. It was a nightmare. But anyway, it's okay, Govike. It's okay. It's good that you don't remember. It's not an important dungeon. It's a very important dungeon, but it's not particularly... It's one I would... Abyss Gate? No, it is not Abyss Gate. That would be silly. Anyway, what was I going to say again? So yeah, it reminds me of the length of Child of Light Child of Light dungeons. So if you did watch our playthrough of Child of Light, that was a short game as well. And it had layouts that were kind of similar to this, but you couldn't fly through the dungeons in this game. So you had to actually do more things. I also feel that, I don't know about the underwater sections, they kind of were okay. They're not the most fun, because especially when you start losing air, but at least you get so many air bubbles that's not a big deal. And if you get in the fight, you would get all your air back anyway for some reason, so I am completely fine with that. One other thing I didn't like is that their game is... Let's talk about the bugs in the game. Oh, jeez, this game and its bugs. Bugs whenever you watch a video and it will just freeze in place. Bugs with the credits. Bugs with restarting things. So sometimes when you died in certain areas, you will restart in the weirdest parts. And it's possible that if you die in like underwater, you might respawn in the place with the where you last touched the switch, which was inside a blade. So you get hit anyway. You always get hit and hurt yourself. And it's just like the game is so needed a QA pass, a quality assurance pass. It really does right now. I hope. Fortunately, this game is still being updated, and they did fix some bugs, so it is possible. I mean, but as of this patch, it's like there's so many bugs that are really random. Enemies getting stuck in corners that happen. I think the worst one is when a boss literally got stuck in a corner, but she was in like I can't hit you mode, so I ended up in the boss fight. I couldn't win. Yeah, that's the most infamous one. That one where she got trapped in the right and she could not get out of that mode. That was really obnoxious. And this game, I feel like that's the single worst part of the game is outside of just the platforming, is the bugs are just, there's just so many bugs. Bugs when you watch videos, like some of the videos that happen too. The only thing that mitigates the effect of bugs is the fact that at least the game is, one nice good thing about the game is that it auto saves for you. Yeah, hard mode is like so much HP, so it just makes it worse. It makes it a chore to play this game in hard mode. And like all the bosses have, okay, wait, we talked about the 8 bosses already, but like there's just so many bugs. There's like translation, text errors, and there's just like, it just has this, gives this feeling of, I don't know how to say it. It's like this feeling of unpolished, like it feels unfinished and unpolished. It needed like a real good bug sweep. It's not a well-designed hard mode. I don't think it is. It's basically a Tales of Series hard mode where they just add the HP and make it so that they do their supers much more often. And so it's kind of like kind of lame. Yeah, I got her down to like I think near red and she was stuck. So I was just like, that was horrible. Like bugs should not happen in combat like that. And like there's just so many weird things. And I think sometimes the bugs work in your favor. So like against when Enso was fighting Nabi, his father, because his father doesn't have a dash to get out of things, you could keep his father in the air forever. So you won basically you have an I win button. At least I appreciate the bug working in my favor, but I hate when it works in the boss's favor. And like this, the whole combat bugs, just physics doesn't help, and this the random bugs. So, I feel like that's pretty much the downfall of the game. The game needed some tightening on the bug count. And I don't know, I mean, PC is always kind of like a Wild West kind of deal where you're like, it might work and there might be something that might cause the game to bug. But this level of bugs, if they ever did like a console release, they would have to like really clean this crap up. This would not be okay. I would say that's a bug because like the bosses should not be able to be. You should not be able to just exploit and cheese the boss that way. What? Oh, yeah, I have to write that in Chinese. It's fine. I think they would fail lock check 10 times over. Yeah, that's basically it. There's just so many weird things. Like, I mean, it's not unplayable. It's just they happen really randomly. And I think that's the worst part of it. But it is, as I showed you, it is possible to get through the game all the way through, even with the bugs. So it's technically not game breaking, but just the fact that your credits don't work sometimes. Oh, that's a... 技不如人. But anyway, let me see. What else I gonna say? Yeah, it's just that this is basically the biggest downfall is that they just needed a bug pass. If the game functioned better, yeah, Dark Souls. I haven't actually played Dark Souls, so I can't really explain why Govike believes that, says that, but maybe someday, I don't know. Dark Souls, I feel like it's more of like, there's a lot. Okay. I don't know if I'll ever play Dark Souls on this stream because it's already fairly well known. So I try not to do too many things that are very, very modern and well known, especially since Dark Souls came out very recently. But anyway, as I was saying, like, yeah, there was a lot of bugs that failed that would make this game not console portable, and they have to fix this. I hope they do. There is hope that they will fix these bugs eventually if people keep reporting them. I'm sure they could. It's just that, yeah, there's just a lot of them, and it's kind of a shame. It's just a kind of like a marring of, like, it just makes it much worse. It just makes it like yeah, you can't fix everything and get stronger through failure. Sorry, when I say games that are modern, like, generally I tried. If you notice, I don't pick like the newest game on the lot. Okay, this is actually one of the newest games I've ever played on this stream. So I generally don't pick things that are like Dark Souls is played by a lot of streamers, so there are tons and tons of Let's Players of Dark Souls. So I don't feel that it's anything special for me to play it for myself. I am probably gonna play it on my own, but I don't know if I will play it as a mainstream game because I'd rather focus on games that are either unknown like this one or the lesser well known, or if there's something that I really really liked and it has some kind of things. Anyway, that's a whole separate topic about the policy, about my game selection policy. So yeah, if they've really fixed, I think if they could fix the bugs, it would go a long way to making this game even better or closer to masterpiece level. Because honestly, I will say this: like, for a lot of the other games, I talk about their story. Let me see. What was I gonna say again? So for like, other than Earthbound, which I really like the gameplay of that, I will say, like, for the most part, the games that who store for Earthbound and Xenoblade, that's a different thing. I love the gameplay in Earthbound and Xenoblade and the story, so I really love those games. But for the games like The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1, which I played on this stream, and another game called, what do we call it again? Lunar Silver Star, not Lunar Silver Star. The other game whose story I really liked. Wow, I'm blanking out. No, Xenogears. Those two games had the fault where, like, I love the story of both Xenogears and The Legend of Sword and Fairy, but my gosh, they are horrible to play through sometimes. The controls were like, Legend of Sword and Fairy 1 has horrible dungeons and the battle system's really really boring, and then for Xenogears it was a matter of like the battle system's completely busted for gears, and the dungeons are horrible and the controls are horrible. So like, for those two games, the story more than made up for all the deficiencies. Had to make up for all the deficiencies of the game. They were basically the one things that kind of saved the games from being completely from me calling them very bad games. But this game in particular, I think the story, at least the gameplay, the general gameplay, I did enjoy it. Oh, I don't know, XJ1 at least. I don't know about the other games in the series future. I haven't played 4, 5, and 6 yet, so I will be the judge of that. But at least with The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1, the battle system's awful. But at least in this game, in contrast, the gameplay in this game is really nice. It's actually really fun. I actually had a lot of fun. I felt like, even despite the stupid battle singing systems and the battle physics and the bugs, I still had a lot of fun, and I felt like, oh, I have to be really awake to do this. I didn't feel bored at all. I was never bored in most fights. It was just a little, there were some that were a little frustrating, but like, I still had fun trying to figure out combos and using all my spells and my Aurions all together. And there's this sort of tension when you fight that's kind of missing from turn-based games, and that's why I really did enjoy this one. So I feel like, at least if the gameplay was less buggy, if the game was less buggy, I would say this is still a decent game. So, anyway, I've been saying that, and I'm kind of building up to my overall view of this game in comparison for myself. Okay, given all that I've said, I do really think that this game, I would say this is more of a thumbs up rent, where it's more like I don't think I would. The game doesn't have much replayability, but I mean you could rent it over a set of 2 weeks and probably beat it fairly quickly. Notice it took me 37 hours to beat, and if you decided not to do a 37, not to do it the slow way like I did, you could definitely beat it faster than I did, maybe in 30 hours or 28. The but let's see, what was I gonna say again? But yes, I actually think it's worth checking out. You can't rent games nowadays, right? I'm just kind of using this old scale as more like I would play this once, but I don't think it's yeah, I know. It's sort of an old school kind of system. I really don't favor. So if you notice, I normally don't rate games by numbers because I hate numbers. No, but in seriousness, I never felt numbers were very meaningful, and I think it's more of like how whether I think more importantly is whether I recommend the game or not. So I'm sort of leaning towards like you can play this is a game that's worth playing once over, but I don't know if I would go back again because there's not a whole lot you can do outside of there's if you notice there's kind of no new game plus. So is there? Is there a new game plus? Nope. See, if you notice I hit new game, there's nothing. I wasn't given a prompt to say, hey, you can do new game plus. You can see, oh, look at that. This is the beginning of the game. Anyway, I do like the fact that you can open the menu at any time to quit too. I think if you bought this on a Steam sale, it would be fine. I think that's a close enough analogy. Where it's like it did cost you too much to do it. I think I'm sad to say that because I paid full price when I kickstarted it, and I really do think it's still worth playing. Like so, if you did, I would think it's almost worth the full price. But ultimately, because of its shortcomings, the bugs, and the battle physics, and some of the polish, it might be relegated to like you may want to get it a slightly bit cheaper. Especially if you're, here's the thing, it's probably a thumbs up rent for most people because if you're not like hardcore if you didn't have either one, a very strong interest in African philosophy and history, or two, like you didn't love RPGs to death, then maybe you might be a thumbs up rent because for you, this game's bugs might just hurt you, and for some people, the material in this game is particularly heavy. I don't know if I, as a teenager, if I was to play this as a teenager when I was in high school, I don't even know if I could understand half of the stuff in here because it's very heavy material, especially for a game too. Some of it deals with themes that even as adults can't have a difficulty coming to grips with. So that is another factor. I think if you do like RPGs, you should certainly give it you'll definitely enjoy it. If you can, because at least if you can overlook the bugs, it's still very much worth playing. It's still like if you are like a philosophy or someone like me who enjoys a talk about the world and worldviews and religions and philosophies, and then this is kind of the game for you. Like it's a game that appeals to like someone. Yes, vengeance as well. Well, I mean, I think ultimately one thing that I think also works for the game is that the philosophy, even if you don't completely get it, at the very least, even if you don't understand the philosophy fully, like I don't understand the philosophy fully either, at least the base of the story you can understand. They made it so that stuff is all important, but it's only if you don't have to have a full understanding of that to really get something out of the game. And like the story is still like doable. It's still like the morals are still very clear. The only thing is that it's just tough to, as a kid, like you can't process this much stuff that talks about the real world and talks about like real things that are real problems even in our world. It's almost too close to home, honestly. that's what made it hard sometimes, because sometimes like, oh shoot, this reminds me of things that are happening here, even in the real Africa, in our modern world. But anyway, if you do like all that stuff and you do want something that is much heavier than normal like RPG story fare, then this is totally the game for you. I think you'll really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and you can even study and have a feeling of like, where did they get inspired from, and like this is what the beauty of what African culture can be, much more than like simply what little we know. Like Hollywood doesn't tell you about too much about Africa, and the mainstream media certainly doesn't cover like the good parts of African history all that much. So it's not a subject that the West is particularly enamored with, and it's really cool to see something. This is just so different. If you want a different experience, then this is a thumbs up buy. I can't recommend it enough. And if you can overlook the bugs and deal with them, then it's the game for you. And hopefully in the future they will continue working on it. I'm glad that they are still actively developing on it, and I hope it can get closer to being less buggy than it has been. And they are taking feedback, so I'm very happy. Oh yeah, just to note, like the bosses are HP sponges, but they actually released a patch so that the bosses are less HP sponges in hard mode. So I was very happy about that they took that into account. Anyway, excuse me. So basically, I think, yeah, it's either a thumbs up rent or a thumbs up buy, depending on who you are. So there you go. So basically, yeah, go get the game. I don't have anything to say. And if you just want to experience the story, put it on easy mode and call it a day. Like, because in easy mode, everything is it goes a lot faster. If you're only interested in having your own African adventure too. And I guess the only caveat is that there isn't a whole lot you can do after the game is done. So there's not much replayability. There's not many in terms of side quests, but still enjoyable. Still fun, so yeah, go get it. Probably one of the better games I've played on stream in terms of like just as a whole package. I think it would be among my favorite games if it weren't so buggy, and if the combat physics worked a little more consistently. But hey, and that I think guys, that's the end of the review. I've already rattled on about it a lot. Yeah, there's no optional side quests, so there's not a whole lot replayability. I've rattled on about this. I think I'm going to put an end to this review, and it is rather late, so I'm going to stop here because I was like, oh wow, I've gone way past time. The other thing I want to mention is, now that the review's over, let's talk about the next game. The next game